welcome to Simplified Human Physiology for 9th and 10th grades. My name is Dave, and I'll be your teacher for this course. One of the things that I hope to do during this course is to cover just basic knowledge about human physiology without the technical and chemical vocabulary that often gets in the way of learning. And that if you continue on and take the course in college, that's where the appropriate place to have all the technical vocabulary, not in the 9th and 10th grade. Also, I'll be talking in just a calm manner like I am now, as though you are sitting next to me at the table and we're just looking at pictures together. All right? I foresee this course being about 16 modules, each about 30 to 40 minutes long, and covering just about everything in physiology that you would run into in a course. And by the way, if you're already out of school, out in the world of work, and you never had the opportunity to take a course in physiology, well, this is your chance, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. So, with that, let's move on. And what I'd like to do is give you an idea of the topics that we're going to cover in this course. And the first topic we're going to take a look at is the skin. It might surprise you that the skin has quite a few functions other than just protecting us and being a bag holding everything in, and we're going to be taking a look at those things. After the skin, we'll be going to taking a look at the digestive system, because when we eat our food, we have to know where the food goes, right? And this is what we're going to do when we look at the digestive system. It's not enough to eat our food, but we have to have oxygen in order to release the energy that's inside the food. And so we will be looking at the respiratory system, the lungs, and how we breathe. But that still is not enough, because when we take in food and oxygen, it must be carried along by the blood cells. So we're going to take a look at the blood. Now, blood does not just stand around, but it moves throughout the body. And what is the force that makes the blood move is the heart. So we're going to be spending some time seeing how the heart works. Now, the heart, when it pushes out blood, it pushes out into blood vessels. And that is the next part of the course we're going to take a look at, all the various blood vessels, the arteries, the veins, and the capillaries, as well as blood pressure. Now, as the blood circulates around the body, eventually it has to be filtered to take out a lot of toxins and poisons that need to leave the body, and that's the job of the kidneys. So we're going to take a look at the kidneys. The next thing we're going to take a look at is how we know what's going on outside of our body. And one way we know is by seeing things. So we're going to take a look at the eye, see how it works. Seeing things is not quite enough, though. We're going to also take a look at the ear and hearing. And both the eye and the ear, of course, are connected to the brain. The brain, which regulates and controls all of our activities in the body, needs to know what's going on, not only outside but inside. And we're going to take a look at how the brain functions. It's not enough to just look at the brain, but we're going to look at the nerves and see how the nerves go out to different parts of our body and keep us coordinated and regulated. Another thing besides nerves that help regulate our body is glands, and this is the endocrine system of all the various glands. And glands secrete hormones like estrogen, adrenaline, thyroxine, and so on, and also insulin for diabetes. And so we're going to take a look at all the glands, not many of the glands. Next, we're going to take a look at how do we get offspring? And that's the job of the reproductive system. We're going to take a look at the male organs, and we're going to take a look at the female organs. And lastly, because all organisms, all animals, I should say, need to move around in order to hunt and play and mate and other activities, we're going to need a skeletal system, and we need muscles to help us move. So these are the various topics that we're going to cover in this course. I hope you'll stay with us and finish the course. You'll have a very good basic knowledge of human physiology. Okay, now, the next thing we're going to get into is something a little different, because I start my course a little bit different than the usual textbook. And what we're going to do is I'm going to take you back about 3 billion years in Earth history to a time when there was one of the first organisms around. Here's a little one-celled animal that's living in a pond. And the pond, of course, is full of water. Now, even this one-celled organism needs to have food and oxygen. By the way, this is how we're going to abbreviate oxygen, O2, 2 atoms of oxygen. Food and oxygen need to go inside this cell in order to allow it to function. Now, once it takes in the food and oxygen, it sends out waste products, carbon dioxide, and other waste products that we'll talk about in more detail later. This food and oxygen come from the water that's in the pond, and the waste products go back into the water that's also in the pond. Now, we're going to come back and visit this same pond in a couple of million years, and what has happened? Well, our single-celled animal has changed, and is now a multi-celled animal, also living in the pond. Notice we're many cells inside the organism, and here's a membrane surrounding the organism. We still have food coming and oxygen coming into the critter, and it goes through the little membrane here inside. When the critter gets finished with the food and oxygen, CO2 goes out and waste products go out back into the pond water. All right? Now, a couple of billion years go by, million years, excuse me, and what do we see when we come back to the pond? Well, this organism is out on land. It's walking around. And the question is, where's the pond? Well, the pond is now inside the organism. This is the pond. And we still have a multicelled organism surrounded by some kind of a membrane. In the case of humans, this would be the skin, right? We have now we have a specialized hole for the food and the oxygen to enter, and we have another specialized hole for the carbon dioxide and waste products to go out. But from now on, this land animal carries around this pond inside wherever it goes, and if this pond ever is allowed to dry out, the organism dies. So, what do we have today? Is humans. And pardon my art, this is the best I can do. Notice the pond is inside of us. We are definitely multi-celled. In fact, we are 75 trillion cells, all right? The adult human being. A 160-pound person will have about 10 gallons of water inside of them. Now, you all know what 1 gallon of milk looks like or weighs, but we have 10 gallons of water, which is equal to 40 liters. It's the same thing. Now you can imagine a 2-liter bottle of Coke. Think about the 2-liter bottle of water, and you'll have 20 of those inside the human. And the skin, of course, is the bag that holds the pond inside. Now, the name of this unit is Water, Water Everywhere. And so the question is, how much water do we take in each day? Well, surprisingly, each of us takes in about 2 liters of water every day, either through drink or food. Now, again, you know what a 2-liter bottle of Coke looks like. Imagine a 2-liter bottle of water. That's what you take in. Now, if you took in that amount of water and you never let it out, what would happen? Well, you'd grow up into a big ball and you'd pop, right? So there must be a way that the water goes out. And here are the ways that the water goes out. Through your urine, through sweat, through your breath that you when you exhale, and a little bit in your feces to keep the feces moist. The amounts that we're talking about in milliliters is about 1,400 milliliters of urine, 300 milliliters of sweat, 200 milliliters in your breath, and about 100 milliliters in your feces. This all adds up to 2,000 milliliters, which is the same as 2 liters. So we have 2 liters in and we have 2 liters out every day. Now, where is this water inside your body? Well, here's a blood vessel coming down through part of your body, and here are body cells that are going to need the food and the oxygen that the blood is carrying. And where is the water? Well, water is inside every one of these cells. In fact, about 65% of all of your body water is inside cells. The rest of the water is between your cells. That's about 30% of the water. And then a smaller amount is in your bloodstream itself, around 5%. And there's 100% of the water in your body. Okay? Now, I have a question for you. I've kind of reviewed most of the organs in the body, and the question for you is this. I'd like you to think about it. Which is the biggest organ in the body? Is it the liver, the lungs, the skin, or the large intestines? Well, I think you might be surprised, or maybe not. But here's the answer. It's the skin. And this is the one I'm going to use. We have a number of pictures of the skin, and I'd like to use this one first. There we go. Okay. Now, we already said, oh, by the way, the skin is 9 pounds, and it occupies a huge surface area. That's what makes it the biggest organ in the body. Okay? How many got that right? Raise your hand if you got that right. Okay. So what can we say about the skin? What is so interesting about it? Well, it's divided into 3 parts. A very top layer here, a middle layer here, and a bottom layer right here. The top layer we call the epidermis. The middle layer, the dermis, and the bottom layer, the subdermis. That's pretty easy, okay? The very top layer actually is composed of dead cells. And just under the layer of dead cells is a layer of live cells, living cells, that as they live, they push upward and eventually die and become part of the dead surface here. The dead surface has a waxy substance inside of it which keeps the body fairly waterproof. Okay? As we go down into the dermis, we notice a lot of things happening. Probably something very obvious is the blood vessels, a very rich blood supply to the skin. One of the thing that blood all carries, of course, is food, molecules, and oxygen. But surprisingly, blood carries heat. And heat is brought from the interior of the body out to the skin. Like on a hot day when you need to lose heat, the blood vessels will open up, allow more blood to come to the skin, which carries heat, and that heat will be lost out through the skin to the outside world. We also see a sweat gland right here. And a sweat gland, sweat is basically water with a few salts in it, but try to think of it as water. And the sweat goes up through the gland here and up to the pore out onto the skin. And again, on a hot day, you're going to need to lose heat. So as water from sweat pours onto your skin, as that water evaporates into water vapor, that change requires heat, and the heat comes from the skin. And that's how you cool off. You lose heat from the skin. Let's see what else we have here. This obviously is a hair follicle, right? And in conjunction with the hair follicle, we have oil glands. And the oil glands secrete or release their oil out onto the skin, just like this, through a little pore up here. And as the oil comes out onto the skin, it makes it more flexible and soft. So we can thank the oil gland for that. What else do we have here? If you look, kind of hard to see, but look here and over here and over here, we have little nerve receptors. And all of the nerve receptors, of course, are connected to the brain. These nerve receptors receive 5 kinds of sensations. They receive touch, pressure, pain, heat, and cold. And for each of those receptors, sensations, there is a separate kind of nerve receptor. So it's quite specialized. Okay, that takes us, I think that's it for the dermis, and it takes us down to the subdermis, which is primarily made of fat cells. Usually in pictures they have little yellow globules here that are a layer of fat, and the layer of fat cells is usually on a layer of muscle tissue, which you don't see down here. That would be the muscle tissue. So that's kind of an overview of the skin. Let's take a look at, by the way, the skin itself is 1/8 of an inch in diameter, or 2 millimeters. And I have here in my hand a electric charger that most of you have in your home, and I want to hold it to my finger here so you can see how thin it is. That's how thick the skin is. 1/8 of an inch, or about 2 millimeters. Okay. Now, here's something else that's interesting about the skin, because it has a lot of surface area. I'm going to hold this little paper up for the camera, and I've already measured this little piece of paper. It's 1 centimeter on each side, which makes it a square centimeter. Now, the question is, if I took this little piece of paper and I had lots and lots of little pieces of paper like this, and I covered all of my skin with little pieces of paper like this, how many papers would I need to completely cover my skin? Well, anybody guess 17,000 little pieces of paper? That's what it would take. Okay. Let's move along now. We have a couple more pictures of the skin. This is similar to the one we saw, a little bit different. It shows sweat glands, It shows blood vessels, and we see that we have oil glands in connection with the hair follicles. Okay. Okay, so here we have another picture. It's the same idea of the slide of the skin. Again, we have the epidermis, the dermis, and the subdermis. Okay. Again, we see our sweat glands. The oil glands are usually in conjunction with the hair follicle. And we see a rich supply of blood vessels. No surprise there. Here's a little bit different picture. But again, you should be able to, by now, picture a number of these in your mind. Blood vessels, fatty tissue down below, sweat gland, oil glands. Oh, here's some better pictures of the nerve receptors here, here, and I guess that's it. Yeah. All right. Then we have kind of a large picture here. We'll see if we can fit it in. Again, we have sweat glands, oil glands, blood vessels, and the same epidermis, dermis, subdermis. By the way, if you were to go to a doctor who specialized in the skin, what would we call that doctor? Well, if you said dermatologist, you are right. Here's another picture showing again the subdermis, the rich blood supply in the dermis. Here you can see the two layers of the epidermis a little bit more clear. And finally, as far as our pictures are concerned, we have picture of the epidermis. Here's the dead layer, and here's the living layer just under the epidermis. By the way, these skin cells that are growing and pushing upward like this, they push upward. It takes them about 3 to 4 weeks to come up all this way and die and become the very top layer. So essentially, you have a new skin every 3 to 4 weeks. And what happens to the dead layer up here? Well, you kind of just slough it off like that. You don't even notice it. Let's do a little review here. The skin is basically a bag holding all of the water in, okay, which is its obvious function. It's around 9 pounds, which makes it the heaviest organ or the biggest organ in the body. It's around 2 millimeters thick, and the surface area is about 17,000 square centimeters or 1.7 square meters. It consists of a dead layer of cells with a live layer of cells under that. When we look at the the dermis layer, we are not surprised to find that we have a rich supply of blood vessels, nerve cells for sensations, touch, pressure, pain, heat, and cold. We have sweat glands. As a matter of fact, someone actually counted our sweat glands on our skin and came up with 2.5 million sweat glands. If you divide this by the surface area, it comes to about 47 sweat glands per square centimeter. Now, do you think these are all evenly divided throughout the skin? Well, they're not. As you might expect to know, most of your sweat glands are going to be in the moist areas of your body, the armpits, the groin area, the palms of your hands, and your face. Okay? And finally, we have the oil glands. Not finally, but we have oil glands which help to keep your skin soft and flexible. And of course, the hair follicles are obvious. Finally, we have the subdermis, layer of the skin. which is composed of fat cells with an underlying probably muscle, and then we have connective tissue, which is tissue that connects the bottom of the dermis to the muscle tissue. And as we go through the course, we will run into connective tissue quite a bit. It just holds tissue together, connects it. And this is the subdermal layer. We're going to wrap up our look at the skin with two conditions that you'll run into in the skin, and we're going to see what brings these about, what causes these. All right. And pimples and body odor. They're kind of both related to the same thing. What causes pimples? Well, when the oil gland here secretes its oil out onto the skin here, there's a little pore right here, all right? And so sometimes the pore gets constricted or plugged up. Now, you have bacteria that are normally living on your skin. Normally, they don't harm you unless the skin is cut. If the skin is intact, the bacteria just live normally on your skin. But if this little oil gland gets plugged up, the bacteria will come and eat the oil because to them it's like little hamburgers. They love it. And if they secrete little toxins, they will create an infection, and this area becomes infected. It pushes out and becomes a pimple. The white stuff in the pimple are dead little white blood cells that have gone to the infection to try to take care of it. Now, body odor is also caused by the oil glands. So as the oil is secreted out onto your skin, especially in your armpits and your groin area, the bacteria in those areas, again, eat the oil, and as byproducts, they secrete byproducts that don't smell very good, and there's your body odor. And the only way you can take care of that really is to wash those areas with soap and water and keep your bacterial level and your oil level down to as low as possible. Okay, so with that, we're going to wrap this up. This has been Water Everywhere. Our next module is going to deal with where does the food go, and we're going to talk about digestion. So please come on back for our second module, and this is Dave. I'll see you there. Goodbye.